Welcome to True Crime Limited. Today we will be discussing the gruesome machete murder of Athalia Ponsell Lindsley. Let's give you a little background on Mrs. Lindsley. Lindsley was born into a wealthy family in Toledo, Ohio. She was raised in the Isle of Pines, a possession of Cuba and the Caribbean Sea. She spent 20 years in New York as a model, chorus line dancer, and a hostess of Buddy Collier's television game show, Winner Takes All. At one time, she was engaged to Joseph P. Kennedy, but unfortunately, he would be killed in World War II. She would end up marrying a former mayor of St. Augustine, Florida, James Jinx Lindsley, 4 months before her murder. James was a very successful real estate agent. Despite the two being newlyweds, they lived in different homes. It was said that she was getting ready to sell the home, but she didn't want to leave the house vacant. The attack. Between 5:30 and 6 p.m. on January 23rd, Athalia Lindsley was attacked on the front steps of her home. The assailant was described as a middle-aged white male wearing a white dress shirt and dark dress pants. According to the medical examiner, Dr. Arthur Schwartz, who performed the autopsy, she was struck 9 times by the machete on her hand, arm, and in the head. One of her fingers was severed and she was nearly decapitated. The only thing missing from her house was a pet blue jay whose cage was found smashed. Was there a problematic neighbor? Lindsley had an ongoing feud with her neighbor Alan Griffith Stanford Jr. One of his complaints was excessive barking coming from the Lindsley residence after she took on 6 stray dogs. In a transcript of an October 1973 county meeting, one of the commissioners had remarked, quote, "I am aware you are a neighbor of the Stanfords and that y'all have had neighbor problems," end quote. To which Lindsley answered, quote, "That's true. My life has been threatened. You mentioned personal things. He threatened my life," end quote. Towards the end of the attack, an 18-year-old neighbor, Locke McCormick, heard the sounds of commotion, and he went outside to investigate. He allegedly shouted to his mother that, quote, "Mr. Stanford is hitting Miss Ponsell," end quote. After the perpetrator left, the McCormicks went next door and saw Lindsley laying in the pool of her own blood on her porch and called the police. Stanford was indicted where he pled innocent and brought to trial. After just 2 hours of jury deliberation, he was acquitted. Critics accused the police of botching the investigation and tainting evidence. The case is still open to this day. The sheriff offered a $500 reward to anyone with information on the case. On February 17, 1974, a county mechanic named Dewey Lee said he searched the marshes 1 mile from Lindsley's home and discovered a machete, a package containing a bloodied white shirt, dark pants, a watch, and a pair of shoes. After Athalia's death, Frances Bemis, a 70-year-old retired department store public relations exec and fashion consultant, told her friends that she knew something about the murder. Bemis, who was reportedly a friend of Athalia's, was said to have been collaborating with the writer on a book about Athalia after her death. She did not seem afraid when Athalia turned up slain and told the St. Augustine Record, quote, "I think St. Augustine is the safest place I have ever lived. I go out walking at night and will continue to do so. I went out walking the same night that the murder took place," end quote. Frances had indeed continued to go walking at night, including on November 3rd, 1974, a little over 9 months after Athalia was murdered. The next day, not far from where Athalia was murdered, a man walking his dog found Frances dead in a vacant lot. Was Frances killed by Athalia's killer? According to the coroner, Frances had been bludgeoned with a stone rock. Her clothing had been ripped off, but there was no signs of rape. The New York Daily News wrote that her body had been burned as though a killer had tried to destroy the corpse. Police Chief Virgil Stewart did not believe that there was a connection between Frances and Athalia's murders at the time. With 2 women violently dead in St. Augustine, Florida in 1974, both cases still remain unsolved. Do you think Frances' death was connected to Athalia's? Let me know in the comments below.